President Joe Biden hosted the Philippines president at the White House, with the two leaders expected to agree on new guidelines for stronger military cooperation. The two countries reaffirmed a 1951 mutual defense treaty that calls for the United States to act in the event of an armed attack on the Philippine military. Apart from this, the guidelines will also focus on military coordination across land, sea, air, space and cyberspace. The U.S. administration will also transfer 3 C-130 aircraft and look to send additional patrol vessels to the Philippines. The United Nations has announced that they are dispatching veteran UN humanitarian corridor coordinator Martin Griffiths to Sudan in an attempt to bring immediate relief in the country. Currently stationed in Nairobi, the UN aid chief is set to visit Sudan on Tuesday. According to the UN spokesperson, the UN hopes that he will be able to bring immediate relief to millions of people whose lives have been turned upside down by the ongoing fighting in Sudan.
Also, the Canadian Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly.
The conflict in Sudan, however, is on the brink of spilling over to its neighboring countries. According to the United Nations, some 800,000 citizens could flee the conflicted nation. Reportedly, some 40,000 have already crossed into Egypt and more numbers are to follow. The United Nations humanitarian coordinator in Sudan warned that the humanitarian crisis in the country is turning into a full-blown catastrophe. South Sudan, Chad, Egypt, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Libya and Central African Republic are closest to getting affected by the crisis brought on by Sudan's warring generals. Dozens of British and American nationals are awaiting rescue in Port Sudan as fighting in Sudan shows no signs of slowing down. Some British nationals are waiting at a hotel in Port Sudan for a British military ship bound for Saudi Arabia. Some stranded people expressed that they've been stuck 4 days in such a tense situation. However, the U.S. State Department deputy spokesperson has stated that so far the United States has managed to rescue more than 700 people from Sudan, but further evacuations will depend on the security situation. Bodies of several children exhumed in eastern Kenya showed signs of starvation and in some cases asphyxiation as well. This comes as investigators began the first autopsies of over 100 people linked to a Kenyan death cult. Investigators said that they'd completed 10 autopsies so far out of the 101 bodies discovered last month in shallow graves. Authorities say the dead were followers of the Good News International Church led by Pastor Paul Mackenzie. He is accused of instructing worshippers to starve themselves to death in order to be the first to go to heaven before the end of the world. A Yanomami man was killed and 2 others were seriously injured in an attack by illegal gold miners. The territory in northern Brazil, the 3 people shot were treated by doctors, but one of the indigenous men died hours later. Following the fatal shooting, the Brazilian government has tried to reassure the Yanomami people that it will redouble efforts to remove the remainder of the miners in the reservation. Tensions have been rising since January when the government of President Lula da Silva launched an operation to evict illegal miners who invaded Brazil's largest indigenous reservation. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated in his nightly video address that Russia unleashed a fresh volley of missiles on Ukraine, resulting in 2 people's death and 44 others being injured. These attacks also set off huge blazes, along with damaging dozens of homes and other buildings. This attack came during the second wave of nationwide missile strikes in 3 days by Russia on Ukraine. On the other hand, Russia's defense ministry said that its forces had struck using high-precision, long-range air and sea-based missiles only against Ukraine's military-industrial facilities. Malaysian maritime authorities reported 3 crew members of a Gabon-registered tanker missing after the vessel caught fire off Malaysia's southern coast. The tanker was on its way from China to Singapore with 28 crew members on board when it caught on fire. 23 of the crew members were rescued following the accident. The maritime agency said that the cause of the incident was under investigation. Former U.S. President Donald Trump's motion seeking an invalid trial in a civil battery and a defamation case was denied by the court. The lawsuit was filed by columnist Jean Carroll on the allegations that 76-year-old Republican had raped her in the 1990s. Judge Lewis Kaplan, who is overseeing this case, denied the motion for a mistrial before the trial resumed on Monday. In response to this, Trump's attorney claimed that Judge Kaplan had made a persuasive, unfair and prejudicial ruling. Carroll has filed a civil complaint against Donald Trump. Former right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro stole the show on the 1st of May at Brazil's largest agricultural business fair, where he was acclaimed by supporters from the country's strong farm sector. It was Bolsonaro's first encounter with supporters since he returned from the United States 1 month ago. Bolsonaro said that Brazil is a big country and that has all the conditions to be a great agricultural power. He also criticized the decision by Lula da Silva to recognize new indigenous reservations, a constant complaint by farmers in Brazil's expanding agricultural frontier. Brazilian President Lula da Silva vowed to increase the minimum wage in the country, along with official announcement to raise income tax exemption for lower income bracket. The minimum wage amendment will come at a cost of about $5 billion to the government, while the income tax amendment will cost the government about $3.2 billion. The income tax exemption will extend to individuals earning up to $2,640 per month. The government would present a bill to Congress to make this change permanent. A district board appointed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to oversee the development in and around Walt Disney's Florida theme park announced plans to counter-sue Disney. This comes after Disney filed a lawsuit against DeSantis and the Oversight Board for illegally using government power to punish the company for voicing an opinion that should be protected by free speech rights. The skirmish began last year after Disney criticized a Florida measure banning classroom discussions of sexuality and gender identity with young children. And DeSantis, a Republican who is expected to soon declare that he will run for U.S. president, has repeatedly taken issue with this. South Korea's finance minister stated that further trilateral cooperation between South Korea, Japan and China has become more important for Asia and the rest of the world. Speaking at a trilateral meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors, the South Korean finance minister said such cooperation could cause a speedy and sustainable recovery of the global economy. Representatives of the country also expressed support, saying that they recognize the importance of strengthening economic relations to secure growth and prepare for future shocks. May Day demonstrations in Paris turned violent and several police officers were smothered in flames after they were hit with petrol bombs. At least 108 police personnel have been wounded in total, with 291 people detained across France. Protesters also hurled fireworks and other projectiles during the clashes. Outside Paris, violence erupted in Lyon and Nantes, where some vehicles were set ablaze and business premises were trashed. During May Day marches in Latin America, clashes took place between protesters and police as protesters demanded better labor conditions. Chilean riot police also used a water cannon on protesters as various trade unions came out for the March for International Workers' Day in Santiago. However, in Argentina, May Day was a quieter affair as activists held banners and chanted slogans in front of the presidential palace to demand an increase in the minimum wage and protested the International Monetary Fund deal. American Airlines Group pilots have backed a bid by North American pilots to launch a strike along with Air Canada pilots for a better contract. The first such strike took place in April but was ended as the two sides closed in on an agreement in principle. In March, Delta Airlines pilots ratified a new contract that includes a $7 billion cumulative increase in pay and benefits over 4 years. American Airlines chief executive has said that their carrier is prepared to match the pay rates and profit-sharing formula that rival Delta provided in its new contract. US President Joe Biden marked the end of the Ramadan at the White House, joining Muslim Americans for Eid al-Fitr. Muslims all over the world marked the end of the fasting month of Ramadan by celebrating Eid al-Fitr. US President Joe Biden also took the opportunity to hail the contribution of Muslim Americans to the United States. Geoffrey Hinton, also dubbed as the godfather of AI for his pioneering work in the field, has left his decade-long employer Google. He said that he took this decision so he could voice his concern about the dangers of AI without a conflict of interest with Google. A dust storm in Illinois resulted in 6 people's deaths and 30 others being injured after it caused multiple car crashes, a major pileup on an interstate highway. The crashes involved 40 to 60 cars and multiple tractor trailers, 2 of which caught fire. The director of emergency services in the county said that this was a very difficult scene which was very hard to train for. Authorities set up staging areas away from the crash site to help travelers reunite with friends and family. Conservation groups in the United States have sued the Federal Aviation Administration, challenging its approval of Elon Musk's SpaceX rocket launches next to a national wildlife refuge in South Texas without a greater environmental study. The lawsuit comes 11 days after SpaceX attempted to send its next-generation Starship rocket on its first test flight, ending with the vehicle exploding over the Gulf of Mexico after blasting the launch pad to ruins on liftoff. The force of the liftoff hurled chunks of reinforced concrete and metal shrapnel thousands of feet from the site adjacent to the lower Rio Grande Valley National Wildlife Refuge. Special coronation vestments, some of which have not been worn in 70 years since the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, are being prepared to be used during the crowning of King Charles on the 6th of May. 2 significant historic garments in particular, known as the Super Tunica and Imperial Mantle, will take center stage during the ceremony. The Super Tunica is a long gold silk coat trimmed with gold lace. It was originally made for King George V's coronation in 1911. The Imperial Mantle was made for King George in 1821 and was worn at the coronations of King George V, the Sixth, and Queen Elizabeth II.
So after the Super Tunica comes the slow royal.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.